Привет, moi druzy. Hello, my friends. It's day 347. My name is Darren Gerdes. I do these daily updates to keep you apprised of what's going on in Ukraine, but I try to go behind the news. So I don't just go to the news headlines, but I try to help you understand what's behind it. Today, we're going to talk about a few things, just a handful of things, not all over the map. First, I made the list, and I'll talk about what the list is, and you'll probably get a kick out of that. Second, battlefield update, looking at Bakhmut and then what's going to happen in the future. Third, keeping commitments. Now, there's this big story about this balloon going over the United States, and I'll talk about why that matters. I'll also look at the news 1 year ago today to see what was actually happening just before the invasion, and then we'll have some fun with Russian state media. Okay, here we go. So I got this interesting notification in Twitter, and I just started this Twitter account recently. I used Twitter before, but I hadn't really used it very often. So I started an account and where I was, posting things along the lines of Ukraine and things along these lines. Well, Anonymous, I guess this is something how anonymous or whatever added me to the list of Ukrainian. Well, I'm not going to say it. This is a friendly show, but the upside of this is, and I'm fine with that. I remember being told, somebody joked on me that when my kids played soccer for 6 or 7 years, and oh, you're a soccer mom. Okay, that's fine. I mean, if you want to, call me that, that's fine. I spend the time getting to the soccer games, rooting for my kids. Doesn't bother me. I have a black belt. I'm not really worried about that. I take this particular thing as a badge of honor. So this guy's compiling a list of those who are pro-Ukrainian, but he's doing it from the Russian side, it looks like. And okay, that's fine. I'm happy to be on the list. Sign me up, certainly, with people that are on this side of the line. Okay, on Twitter, we're going to look at the British Ministry of Defense. Over the last week, Russia has continued to make small advances in its attempt to encircle Donbas town of Bakhmut. They've been at Bakhmut for 7 months now, and they haven't been able to take it, but they're getting closer and closer incrementally, very gradually. I'm not sure if they'll get it. Maybe they will. I can't tell that. But while what they're doing is they're trying to encircle from left and the right simultaneously, or actually it's kind of like northeast and southwest simultaneously, and cut off certain roads. And the British Ministry of Defense concluded while multiple alternative cross-country supply routes remain available to Ukrainian forces, Bakhmut is increasingly isolated. Now, all that could change if you had the right armor, tanks, those kind of things in order to defend the city, but it's not there right now. Nevertheless, Zelensky was thanking those who were putting up their defense, and he's talking about prisoners being exchanged and other things. But then he said this, and I think this is the right tone. Zelensky very often sets exactly the right tone. It's not about the efforts of the plans of Russia. It's about the courage and determination of our soldiers, the effectiveness and speed of all those who help and support our defense forces, the attentiveness and persuasiveness of all those who defend Ukraine's international positions, the strength and unity of our people, all those who work for our victory, and all those who support our heroes and the Ukrainian state. To preserve all elements of our resilience is to guarantee victory. Glory to our soldiers. Thank you to everyone who helps. Glory to Ukraine. And that's the right tone. And whether Bakhmut will remain or fall is an open question. Only time will tell, and it largely depends on what weapons and support they get. Okay, let's turn to the ISW. The ISW, there are two things I want to highlight here. Russian decisive offensive operations are unlikely to target Zaporizhzhia city. So where's the next offense going to be? Well, the ISW doesn't think it's going to go all the way to Zaporizhzhia, and there's a reason. The Russian military continues to prepare for an offensive in western Luhansk Oblast, but they don't think that they have the capacity. Russia has not shown the capacity to sustain the multiple major offensive operations that would be necessary to simultaneously reach the Donetsk Oblast administrative borders and take Zaporizhzhia. So you have to have certain supply lines and other factors that go into place, and I can't see it all, but they are seeing like all the things that have to happen in order to get there. They don't think it's going to actually take. So that's what's happening now. That's what's happening future. Nevertheless, Zelensky says the situation in the east is getting tougher. Russia is throwing more and more troops into the battle to break down Ukrainian defenses. And again, it's a race against the clock. Okay, let's shift gears and talk about this weird thing with the balloon that went over the United States. There was a Chinese weather balloon, or, well, the Chinese say it's a weather balloon. The U.S. is a little bit more skeptical, says that it's some kind of spy balloon. They say that's just blown over the country, but it blown over the country in places that could be somewhat sensitive. which is kind of interesting. So Taiwan says, now Taiwan is interested in this because of China, right? Chinese balloon incident should not be tolerated by the international community. Right? Now, I'm going to look at this as an analog for what's going on in Ukraine with NATO, but let's just look at the article. Taiwan said that the suspected Chinese balloon that was flying over the U.S. should not be tolerated by the civilized international community. The U.S. shot down the balloon off the east coast of the country on Saturday. China responded negatively to the action, calling it an overreaction by the United States government. Okay, so that's just, why would Taiwan be concerned? Well, for the same reason that Ukraine would be concerned, because there's credibility here. Like, there was a general on the news, and I can't show you the video because I just saw it on the news, right? He was saying, like, this was a bad lack of decision making, a lack of quick decision making to determine in the early hours of what was going on, and make a decision right away. Here's RT with the same article. U.S. shoots down Chinese spy balloon. The U.S. has shot down what it termed a Chinese surveillance balloon off the coast of South Carolina. For those of you who don't know, South Carolina is on the east coast by the Atlantic, and it came over Alaska, through Canada, and down into the country, and went right across the country before it was eventually shot down. The Pentagon officials reportedly advised Biden against shooting down the balloon, leaving it free to travel for nearly 3 days. So if a Chinese balloon was trying to gather information, how bad of a look is that when you can't make a decision to do something about it before it gathers whatever it's going to gather? And so that's really the thing that you need to worry about, because the credibility of the U.S. is very important, and Taiwan is aware of that. Same issue happens when the credibility of NATO is at stake, when they say, hey, we're going to supply Ukraine with these materials or these weapons or with this money or whatever else. If you don't do it, your credibility is at stake. Beijing has denied accusations of espionage. Well, of course they did. Like, they're not going to come out and say, hey, we're spying. With Chinese Foreign Ministry describing the balloon as a civilian airship used for research, mainly meteorological purposes, which has deviated from its intended course. It may be, but it may not be, and they're not going to tell the truth about it if it's not. Austin said that it was being used to surveil strategic sites in the continental United States, and they shot it down with an F-16. Now, doing it late was kind of poor form. It was a bad look, and you really don't want to do that. You need to establish your credibility and stick to your promises. Here is another bit of this. This is really interesting. In business, we use the term of floating a trial balloon, and this is what the Chinese, it looks like, have done. How will the U.S. react if we do this thing? What's the next step? So a trial balloon, when we talk about floating a trial balloon in a business context, is a tentative measure taken or a statement made to see how a new policy will be received. Different members of the cabinet are sending up one trial balloon after another. This was a literal trial balloon. So what will the Chinese do to be a little bit more aggressive? Same kind of issue with what's going on in Ukraine. Putin taking steps in 2014, or actually, let's roll the clock back. In 2008 in Georgia, nothing checked. 2014, nothing checked. So now we have the problem that we have in 2022 and 2023. So I think you need to be aware of this kind of thing, and it's a metaphor for the same kind of thing that the United States and NATO have to do in Ukraine. Okay, now this was interesting as well. A friend of mine, someone I actually know, took some video of this just as it was being shot down, because he happened to be in Myrtle Beach at the time.
Well, guess what? They just hit. They just shot
it. Hit here. Here's the plane flying away.
There's the plane going away from it right there. The balloon itself has been hit. And there it is right there. So that's the balloon right there coming down, see? Look like it's disintegrating.
Okay, so that's it. But you got to be very careful not to allow an enemy to do something like that, because if they're a bully, they escalate. That's why this is important. Okay, let's look at the news 1 year ago today and look at February 5th, 2022. Russia forces at 70% level needed for a full invasion, says U.S. officials. And it's interesting to go back and see what was predicted 1 year ago, what they were saying, who was saying what. Russia has in place about 70% of the combat power it believes it would need for a full-scale invasion of Ukraine, and is sending more battalion tactical groups. In the last 2 weeks, the number of battalion tactical groups on the border region has risen from 83 to 83 from 60 as of Friday, and 14 more are in transit. So it's going to balloon. Now, no pun intended. As Russia masses more than 100,000 troops near the border, it is said it is not planning an invasion, but it could take an unspecified military action if security demands are not met. So that's the special military operation. It's not an invasion, it's a special military operation. So they think they're technically telling the truth. Now, here's how we got it very wrong, though. A full-scale invasion would cause major casualties, one of the officials said. That's true. But Ukraine could suffer 5 to 25,000 troop casualties, while Russia's troop casualties could be between 3,000 and 10,000, and civilian casualties could range from 25,000 to 50,000, according to U.S. estimates, the official said. So, again, Ukraine was seen as not being very much in the fight, or not being able to, like, Ukraine would suffer 5 to 25, while Russia would only suffer 3 to 10. That was the official estimate at the time. That's what they thought was going to happen. What they didn't count on was Zelensky and his will to stay in place, and the Ukrainian will to fight. And Zelensky staying in place stiffened the spine of Ukrainians, because if he had fled, this all would have been a whole different direction. And that's really interesting. Now, what we know as of yesterday was that it looks more like nearly 200,000 killed and wounded. It was 180,000 estimate from Finland or Norway or something along those lines. The U.S. had a very similar, something north of that. And somebody said this yesterday, that we haven't even looked at how many missing in action there are, and that's a really interesting thought. The official count for killed, and they only count killed, is 131, 290 killed on the battlefield. That's not including wounded, according to Ukraine. But again, how many are missing in action? How many Wagner forces are just gone? They're MIA. We don't know what happened. How many Russian soldiers are missing in action as well? Okay, let's turn our attentions to some fun with Russian state media. This is today's the U.S. Empire of Lies should be investigated, says a top Russian member of parliament. The UN should open an investigation into Washington's crimes against humanity, said Russian State Duma speaker, like pretty high up, right? Okay. The U.S.'s crimes against humanity should be investigated. So what Russia does in Russian state media is whatever they're doing, they tend to point at somebody else and say, see what they're doing or what they've done. Writing on Telegram on the 20th anniversary of the infamous 2003 speech by then U.S. Secretary of State Colin Powell at the UN Security Council, during which he justified the ill-fated invasion of Iraq, Volodin offered a scathing criticism of what he described as the American Empire of Lies. Okay, but there's a difference between lies and being tricked. Like, Colin Powell thought he had evidence, the British thought the evidence was real, the French thought the evidence was real, all the other Western powers thought, like, hey, there's something here, right? Because Saddam wanted them to believe that that was what was actually going on. So it kind of fooled you, but it didn't work out so well for Saddam in the end. Powell accused Iraq of producing weapons of mass destruction, providing a vial with white powder as proof. He noted that the same applied to NATO's promise not to expand eastwards after the collapse of the Soviet Union and the Eastern Bloc, as well as to the 2014-2015 Minsk agreements. Okay, so the way the propaganda works is you use selective facts. What they left out of this is, okay, NATO's promises not to expand eastwards were verbal, like, hey, look, give East Germany back, and we're not going to move any further. Talking to the Soviet Union, which is no longer. Russia is there, and Russia's got an economy like the size of Texas or something like that. It's not exactly this great superpower. It's its own little entity that is a fraction of what the Soviet Union was. The Soviet Union doesn't exist. But what they left out of this was they're talking about the Minsk agreement. They left out the Budapest Memorandum, where the US, the UK, and Russia guaranteed the borders of Ukraine in order for them to give up their nuclear weapons. But they left that out conveniently. Isn't that interesting? So that's how they're framing their article. Okay, so I want to thank those of you who have purchased the complete collection of Vladimir Putin's Truth About Ukraine, the GAD gift that keeps on giving back to Ukraine, which is extra fun. You can buy this as a gift and send it to a friend who is spouting Russian propaganda points and then get the reaction from him later on. Okay, thank you. If you like this, please like, subscribe, share. You can buy me a coffee if you want to support me. Thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine, and I'll be back tomorrow. I hope you will be too.